The city lights of San Francisco stretched far and wide, glowing like little fireflies against the dark sky. It was a night that felt magical, full of stories waiting to happen. Inside the Silver Crest Hotel, a fancy and expensive place, huge sparkling lights hung from the ceiling, making everything shine like gold. The richest and most famous people had gathered there, talking, laughing, and clinking their glasses of bubbly champagne. Soft music played in the background, making the night feel even more special. Keanu Reeves walked in. He was dressed in a simple black suit without a tie. His dark hair was a little messy, but in a cool way. He didn't care about all the rich and famous people around him. He wasn't here to show off or make friends. He was here because he believed in something important. The big party was for a good cause, to raise money for kids who didn't have much. The money would help them go to school and have a better future. Keanu had been helping this cause for years, but he never bragged about it. He quietly walked through the crowd, smiling politely at people who recognized him, shaking hands but never staying in one place for too long. At the far end of the room there was a silent auction. People were bidding money on beautiful paintings, sculptures, and special experiences. Each item had a little sign explaining why it was special. Keanu's eyes landed on a painting that was different from the rest. It wasn't made by a famous artist, but by a little girl from an orphanage in Chicago. The painting showed a bright sunrise over a broken city. It wasn't perfect, but it had heart. Keanu felt something special when he looked at it. He picked up a pen and wrote his bid, $100,000. All the money would go straight to helping kids. Just as he put the pen down, a sharp voice spoke behind him. "Are you lost, or did you take a wrong turn?" Keanu turned around. His face was calm, giving nothing away. Standing in front of him was Damien Caldwell, a very rich and powerful man who invested in big tech companies. Damien had gray hair slicked back and wore a very expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a whole year. He looked at Keanu from head to toe and smirked like he thought he was better than him. "I didn't know they were letting just anyone in here," Damien said, swirling his glass of champagne. "Or maybe you're here as staff. Bartender, perhaps? No offense, I just assumed." His three rich friends laughed meanly, their chuckles full of arrogance. Keanu didn't react. He had met many people like Damien before, people who thought money made them better than others. Instead of getting mad, he just looked at Damien, staying quiet. His silence made Damien uncomfortable. Damien clicked his tongue. "You know there's a dress code for these events," he said, fixing his sleeve. "You should get a proper tuxedo if you want to be around real money." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes showing a tiny bit of amusement. "Good to know," he said in a calm voice, not at all bothered. He turned slightly, ready to walk away, but Damien wasn't finished. "Hold on," Damien said, stepping closer. He lowered his voice so only Keanu could hear. "I don't know who let you in, but this place is for people who actually contribute to society. You're just an actor, someone who plays pretend for a living. Let me give you some advice. Next time, stay on your side of the velvet rope." Then, in a shocking and rude move, Damien spat on Keanu's shoe. For a moment, the whole room went silent. People nearby gasped, their eyes wide with shock. A woman holding a glass of wine let out a tiny gasp. Murmurs spread through the room like ripples in water. A billionaire had just spit on Keanu Reeves. The air felt thick with tension. Keanu looked down at his polished shoe, now dirty with Damien's spit. Then he looked back up at Damien, still completely calm. He reached into his pocket, took out a handkerchief, and carefully wiped his shoe. His face never changed. He never got angry. He never lost his cool. Damien, expecting Keanu to explode with anger, let out a small laugh. "That's what I thought," he muttered, turning his back, thinking he had won. But what Damien didn't know, what he was too full of himself to see, was that everyone in the room had seen what happened. And they weren't impressed. In fact, they were disgusted. A woman whispered, "Did that really just happen?" Another man shook his head. "Unbelievable. And you, yes you watching this right now, if you think Damien just made the biggest mistake of his life, comment 9 right now because this story is far from over." As Keanu stood there, calm as ever, Damien had no idea that his worst moment was just beginning. Because in a few minutes, the whole room would find out exactly who Keanu Reeves really was. And for Damien, it was going to be the most embarrassing moment of his entire life. The room was silent, like the moment before a big storm. The air, which had been filled with laughter and chatting, now felt heavy. People who hadn't been paying attention before were now watching closely, their eyes moving between Keanu and Damien. Some had already started whispering, trying to understand what just happened. Across the room, the microphone crackled to life. A warm but strong voice spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The speaker was Elena Whitmore, the host of the evening and one of the most respected women in the country. She was in her 60s with silver hair pinned back neatly. She wasn't loud, but when she spoke, people listened. The murmuring stopped. Even Damien turned toward the stage, still looking confident, until he heard what she said next. "Tonight, we want to recognize a very special guest. Someone who has helped thousands of children across the country. A man who, without asking for attention, has been one of our biggest supporters for over 10 years. She paused and smiled. This year's largest donor, giving over $5 million to help children get an education, is Mr. Keanu Reeves. The room went completely silent. Then applause erupted, loud, real, and full of admiration. The energy in the room flipped in an instant. Damien's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. His smirk disappeared. His eyes, once full of confidence, widened as he slowly turned to look at Keanu. It was as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. No, this couldn't be real. He had to have heard wrong. But he hadn't. The people in the room, who had been polite but distant to Keanu before, now looked at him with deep respect. Guests came up to shake his hand to thank him. Even the rich and famous, who had been chatting with Damien just minutes ago, started moving away from him. Elena kept speaking. "Keanu, your kindness has helped more than 10,000 students. You've built libraries, funded schools, and given hope to families who thought their children would never go to college. We cannot thank you enough." The applause grew even louder. Elena stepped forward and held out her hand, inviting Keanu to the stage. For a moment he hesitated. Not because he was shy, but because he had never done this for attention. His donations had always been secret. It was never about him. But tonight was different. Tonight he had been treated like he was nothing. And while Keanu didn't believe in revenge, he did believe in lessons. So with quiet grace he walked forward. And as he passed Damien, the once powerful man stood frozen, gripping his champagne glass, his face pale. The crowd moved aside for Keanu with ease. The real power in the room had shifted. When Keanu reached Eleanor, he took her hand, shook it firmly, and then walked up to the stage. For a moment he just looked at the crowd. Some faces he knew, some he didn't. Some people looked shocked, while others were already whispering about how foolish Damien Caldwell had been. Keanu leaned into the microphone, his voice calm and warm. "Thank you," he said. "I'm happy to be here tonight, but the real honor belongs to the kids this foundation helps. They are the ones who inspire me. I may have donated money, but it's the teachers, parents, volunteers, and most importantly, the students who make this cause special." People clapped again, but Keanu wasn't done speaking. He glanced at the auction booklet on the podium, then looked at the guests. "I saw a painting earlier tonight," he continued, still calm. "A child from one of these programs made it. It reminded me why these programs matter, why every child should have a chance to learn and create, no matter where they come from." He turned and pointed toward the silent auction. "I just bought that painting," he said, smiling. "I hope it reminds us all why we're here." The message was clear to everyone. Keanu wasn't just generous, he cared. And more than that, he showed how different he was from Damien Caldwell. As Keanu stepped back, the room exploded with applause. He nodded in thanks and stepped down, blending back into the crowd. Meanwhile, Damien Caldwell, standing to the side, looked pale. He had once been so powerful, but now he looked small. People started whispering, "Did you see what Caldwell did to Keanu? How could he be so rude?" Damien's friends, who had been laughing with him earlier, started stepping away. They didn't want to be seen with him. They stopped laughing. Instead, they whispered and looked at each other, realizing they had picked the wrong side. The people who used to stand around Damien now moved toward Keanu, wanting to be near him instead. The power in the room had shifted, and Damien was no longer in control. Damien held onto his champagne glass tightly. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself. "So what? The guy donates money. Big deal. He's just an actor." But no one answered him. Even those who had once followed him closely now knew better than to stand by him. They didn't want to be dragged down with him. Then people's phones started buzzing. Damien's stomach twisted. He pulled out his own phone and saw the trending news. #Damien Caldwell, #Keanu Reeves. Billionaire CEO spits on Keanu Reeves at charity gala. Damien's heart pounded. He scrolled down, reading in horror. Someone had recorded a video, a clear, sharp video, of him spitting on Keanu's shoe. The clip showed Keanu calmly wiping it away. The difference between them was obvious. The caption under the video read, "This is what class versus entitlement looks like. Respect Keanu." Boycott Caldwell. Damien's mouth went dry. The comments were brutal. Damien Caldwell is disgusting. Keanu is a good man. You don't spit on people. Ever. This guy's career is over. I'm never supporting his business again. New posts popped up every second. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His social media was blowing up. His email was filled up with messages from his PR team, his company's board members, and crisis managers. They all wanted an explanation. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was a disaster. Across the room, Keanu finally looked at Damien. Not with anger. Not with pride. But with something worse, pity. That was the final straw. Damien clenched his jaw and balled his fists. He turned sharply and stormed toward the exit, pushing past guests. His heart pounded. His whole career had been built on reputation, and tonight he had ruined it all. And the worst part? Keanu hadn't even tried to take him down. Damien had done it to himself. As he rushed through the ballroom, Damien could feel people's eyes on him. Some people looked amused, others judged him silently. He had always been the most powerful person in the room, but now he was just a walking scandal. A lesson in what not to do. His phone buzzed in his pocket again and again, but he ignored it. He knew what it was, calls from his team trying to fix the mess. But there was no fixing this. Just before he reached the door, a familiar voice stopped him. Damien. He froze. Eleanor Whitmore stood nearby, watching him with disappointment and calm authority. She had worked with the rich and powerful for years, and she had seen men like Damien before. She knew exactly what was happening to him. Damien forced a fake smile, trying to act like everything was fine. Eleanor, he greeted her. Lovely event. I'll be making my donation through my... You don't have to bother, Eleanor interrupted, her voice polite but firm. We do not accept donations from people who don't share our values. Damien stiffened. Excuse me? Eleanor didn't back down. I think you've embarrassed yourself enough for one night. But worse, you've embarrassed this cause. The people here tonight believe in kindness, honesty, and helping others. But you? She sighed, shaking her head. You've proven to be the opposite. Damien's face darkened. You're seriously going to let one stupid misunderstanding define me? Eleanor raised an unimpressed eyebrow. Misunderstanding? You spit on a man's shoe, Damien. At a charity event. And not just any man, Keanu Reeves. Damien's fingers twitched. So what? He snapped. He's just an actor. He plays pretend for a living. People like me make the world work. He just entertains it. There's a difference. Eleanor sighed. And that's exactly why you're finished. Damien's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Eleanor nodded toward the stage. Keanu isn't just a guest here. He's been one of our biggest donors for over 10 years. He's paid for thousands of underprivileged kids to go to college. He's built schools, libraries, he's changed lives. And he's never asked for recognition. She leaned in, lowering her voice. And you? You've spent years using charity as a tax loophole while your companies hurt workers and destroy small businesses. People didn't care before because they weren't paying attention. But after tonight, they will. Damien's throat tightened. I don't know what you think you're implying, but I'm not implying anything. Eleanor's eyes locked onto his. I'm telling you, it's over. Damien opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He turned away, swallowing hard. He knew Eleanor was right. As he stepped out of the ballroom, he realized his world would never be the same again. Elena's voice was calm, almost too calm, as she looked Damien Caldwell in the eye. I'm just stating a fact, she said coolly. You're a businessman, so you should know how optics work. Your stockholders, your clients, your investors, they all care about public perception. And after tonight, no one is going to want to be associated with you. Damien's heart pounded. He felt a rush of heat crawl up his neck, his pulse thundering in his ears. You can't be serious, he scoffed. But Elena didn't even glance back. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in stunned silence. Damien's hands curled into fists. He had to fix this. Spinning on his heel, he scanned the room, his sharp gaze darting across the glittering ballroom. The gala had started as any other, a showcase of wealth, influence, and carefully curated power. He had hosted these events before and had worked in a room like this 1,000 times. Tonight should have been no different. But everything had changed in an instant. His search ended when he spotted Keanu Reeves near the silent auction table. Keanu, effortlessly composed, stood among the very people Damien had spent years charming, manipulating, and controlling. Only now they weren't looking at Damien. They were looking at Keanu. And in that moment, Damien understood something that sent a cold chill through his spine. They weren't drawn to Keanu because he was famous. They weren't gathering around him because he was rich. They were drawn to him because he was a man worth respecting. Keanu wasn't playing the game that Damien had spent his life mastering. He wasn't working the room, securing connections, or leveraging relationships for power. He was simply existing. And that alone had turned the tide against Damien. Because real power wasn't measured in money. It was measured in character. Damien took a shaky breath, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. He turned sharply, pushing through the ballroom doors, his vision blurring with humiliation and fury. He didn't notice the cameras waiting outside. The moment he stepped into the night air, the flashes erupted like a storm. Within hours, his name was everywhere. Damien hadn't slept. His phone had been buzzing relentlessly, calls, emails, notifications piling up faster than he could process. His inbox was a battlefield of frantic messages from PR advisors, legal teams, and executives all demanding answers. But there were no answers that could fix this, because the world had already decided. Sitting alone in his penthouse office, blinds drawn, Damien stared at the glowing screen of his phone. The headlines were a nightmare, each one worse than the last. Damien Caldwell's disgusting display. CEO spits on Keanu Reeves at charity event. Hollywood's most beloved star humiliated by billionaire tycoon. Boycott Damien Caldwell. Backlash grows as investors flee. His fingers tightened around the phone as he scrolled. The comment sections were even more brutal. I don't care how rich this guy is, he's trash. Keanu literally donated millions and walked away with dignity. Meanwhile, this billionaire acts like some spoiled king. Watch his company tank. The public won't forget this. Damien swallowed hard. The public wouldn't forget. But worse, his investors already had. A sharp knock at the door made him flinch. Come in, he barked, forcing his voice into its usual commanding tone. The door swung open and Adrian Mercer, his company's chief operating officer, stepped inside. Normally, Adrian carried himself with a mix of enthusiasm and corporate polish. Not today. Today his expression was cold, professional, calculated. Damien's stomach twisted. He knew that look. Adrian took a slow step forward and placed a file onto the desk. We need to talk. Damien forced a smirk, leaning back. If this is about last night, we both know how these things blow over. The media loves its outrage cycles. Give it a week. No, Adrian interrupted, his voice sharp. This isn't just a bad headline. This is a catastrophe. And it's not going away. Damien's jaw clenched. That's ridiculous. A PR nightmare? Sure. But I'm still Damien Caldwell. My company isn't going. Adrian slid the file closer. Read it. Damien hesitated before snatching it up. His eyes scanned the pages, each line a fresh wound. Investor withdrawals. Partnership terminations. Stock prices plummeted. His grip tightened. This is reactionary. I built this empire. I can fix this. Adrian shook his head. Not this time. Silence stretched between them. Then Adrian sighed, rubbing his temples. The board held an emergency meeting this morning. The shareholders are terrified. Half of them have already started pulling their money out. Our reputation, your reputation, is too toxic now. Damien's pulse pounded. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Adrian straightened his tie. We're voting you out, Damien. Effective immediately. The words hit like a hammer. Damien let out a short, humorless laugh. You're firing me from my own company? Adrian's expression didn't change. Your name is a liability now. The board isn't just thinking about today. They're thinking about the next 5 years. 10. And no one wants to be tied to this. Damien shot to his feet. You can't do this. Adrian met his glare with an unwavering gaze. We already did. He gestured to the papers. Your official resignation is in there. Sign it and we'll negotiate an exit package. Fight it and you'll lose everything. Damien stared at the papers. His hands trembled. He had spent decades building his empire. And now, in less than 24 hours, it was being ripped away. Because he had spit on the wrong man. Because he had underestimated Keanu Reeves. His hand hovered over the pen, shaking. Adrian exhaled. Look, Damien. I'm not here to gloat. But you made this bet. Now you have to lie in it. Damien looked up, rage burning behind his eyes. But the truth was right there in Adrian's steady gaze. There was no fixing this. There was no coming back. With a hand that barely felt like his own, Damien Caldwell picked up the pen and signed away his entire legacy. The ink barely had time to dry before he felt the weight of his decisions suffocate him. Adrian took the papers, sliding them neatly back into the file as if he were filing away the final chapter of Damien's career. "Legal will handle the rest," he said. "Your company accounts and resources will be revoked by the end of the day." Damien's fingers curled into fists. "You think you can just erase me?" he growled. Adrian exhaled through his nose. "You erased yourself." Damien's eyes burned with anger, but deep down he knew Adrian was right. This wasn't just a bad PR week. This was an execution. Adrian adjusted his watch, his patience thinning. "Security will escort you out within the hour. I suggest you use the time to gather your personal belongings." Damien let out a bitter laugh. "Security? I'm not some criminal." Adrian's gaze was unreadable. "No. But you are a liability." With that, Adrian walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Damien stood frozen in place, his world crumbling around him. 4 years he had ruled from this office, making billion-dollar decisions, controlling entire industries. Now it is over. His hands gripped the desk as he looked out over the city that once felt like his kingdom. The world had turned against him in less than 24 hours. Not because of one mistake, because of a lifetime of them. A sharp knock shattered his thoughts. It was security. It was time to go. Damien let out a short, dry laugh. "Disappear? Where do you think I should go, Adrian?" There was a long silence. Then Adrian's voice came through the phone, calm and serious. "Somewhere people don't care who you are." The line went dead. Damien dropped his phone onto the table. His chest rose and fell in short, shaky breaths. That was it. The final blow. His empire was gone. His money was slipping away. The world had moved on without him. For the first time in his life, Damien Caldwell was nobody. Damien sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the drink in his hand. The ice had melted, leaving a watery mess just like his life. He had spent years at the top, making big decisions, controlling companies, and believing he was untouchable. Now he was just a headline, a joke, a warning to others. He turned his gaze toward the television, where the news blared yet another segment about him. Damien Caldwell's empire collapses as shareholders abandon ship. The billionaire once hailed as an industry giant now faces lawsuits, criminal investigations, and public outrage. He picked up the remote and turned off the TV, leaning back against the couch. His mind replayed the events that led him here. The reckless acquisitions, the backroom deals, the people he stepped on to climb the ladder. He had thought himself invincible, but the world had proved him wrong. Adrian's words echoed in his mind. "Somewhere people don't care who you are." Damien scoffed. He had spent his entire life making sure people did care who he was. His name had meant something: fear, power, control. Now it was worthless. He picked up his phone and did something he hadn't done in years. He searched his own name. He regretted it instantly. Every news article, every trending post, every comment was like a knife to the heart. Damien Caldwell, the fall of a billionaire tyrant. Money can't buy respect. Caldwell learns the hard way. Keanu Reeves shows kindness while Caldwell shows arrogance. The comments were even worse. "Hope he enjoys being a nobody. Couldn't have happened to a better person. He treated people badly for years. He thought he was the king, but we decide who stays on top." Damien swallowed hard. He could handle losing money. He could handle business rivals. But losing control of how the world saw him? That hurt in a way he wasn't prepared for. His thumb hovered over his phone screen. Then, before he could stop himself, he typed in a name: Keanu Reeves. Unlike Damien's name, Keanu's was surrounded by love. Keanu Reeves warms hearts again with charity work. This is why people love Keanu. His humility speaks louder than words. Keanu Reeves donates $5 million while Caldwell loses everything. Damien sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Why had he searched for Keanu? Maybe part of him wanted to blame the actor for his downfall. Maybe he wanted to understand how a man with no hunger for power had more influence than he ever did. Then a smaller headline caught his eye. Keanu Reeves visits local children's shelter in San Francisco. Damien stared at it for a long moment. A children's shelter? Before he could think too much about it, he clicked on the address. And without really knowing why, he grabbed his coat and left. Damien's black car pulled up outside the shelter as the sun set. The building was small and simple, but warm and welcoming. Fairy lights twinkled above the entrance. Colorful murals covered the walls, pictures of hope, second chances, and brighter futures. Damien hesitated. He had walked into countless buildings with full confidence, but this felt different. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. Inside, children laughed, volunteers chatted, and the air smelled like freshly baked cookies. Then he saw him. Keanu Reeves sat on the floor, cross-legged, smiling as a little girl excitedly showed him a drawing. He looked happy, completely at ease. Damien's stomach turned. Keanu wasn't doing this for cameras or praise. He was simply there, present in a way Damien had never been. Before Damien could turn and leave, Keanu looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Keanu smiled. Not a Damien-ish smile. Not an arrogant one. Just understanding. Damien took a slow breath. Then, step by step, he walked forward. I wanted to talk, Damien said, his voice lower than usual. Keanu studied him, then nodded toward a quiet corner. Let's talk. Damien followed. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO or a billionaire. He just felt like a person. I didn't expect to see you here, Keanu said. Damien let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, me neither. He hesitated. I guess I just needed to see what this was. Keanu nodded, like he understood exactly what Damien meant. Silence stretched between them before Damien sighed. I lost everything, he admitted. Turns out, the world doesn't tolerate people like me anymore. Keanu tilted his head. People like you? Damien hesitated. People who thought power was enough. He laughed bitterly. It wasn't. Keanu leaned back slightly. And now? Damien met his gaze, something uncertain flickering in his own. I don't know. He swallowed. I don't know who I am if I'm not that. Keanu nodded again as if he had seen this before. After a beat, he said, You can start by being here. Damien frowned. What do you mean? Keanu gestured toward the children, the volunteers, the people who mattered even if the world never put their names in the news. You want to figure out who you are? Keanu said simply. Then stay. Help out. Not as Damien Caldwell, billionaire CEO. Damien. Damien stared at him. He had spent his whole life chasing money, power, and control. Now, the man he had once mocked was offering him something completely different. A chance. Not at wealth. Not at a better public image. A chance to change. Damien swallowed hard. And for the first time in his life, he nodded. Okay. Keanu smiled. Then let's get to work. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories filled with adventure, mystery, and excitement. Your support means the world and it helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.